Welcome to today's webinar, hosted by Rails to Trails Conservancy. We are so glad that you can join us for this session. My name is Eric Oberg. I am the Senior Director of Programs here at Rails to Trails Conservancy. Today's session is brought to you by the Trail Nation Collaborative, RTC's peer learning community that brings together leaders, advocates, and professionals from across disciplines to work together to establish and advance connected trail and active transportation networks across the country. The collaborative provides proven tools, methods, and resources, including the Trail Nation Playbook, combined with RTC's expertise from our Trail Nation projects and beyond, and that of you, our network of partners across the country. We come together to find solutions to challenges and barriers, and work to accelerate the development of these connected trail systems. So many of you have joined us today, and I know why. We have a really exciting slate of presenters. We're honored to have this panel of experts from around the country to share their firsthand experience of the role of trails in disaster planning and recovery. We're joined by Jackie Casino, the Rail Trail Program Manager at the Vermont Agency of Transportation, Saman Dias, Chair of the Maui Bicycling League, and Lisa Raleigh, Executive Director of Riverlink in Asheville, North Carolina. Now, all of you joined for a multitude of reasons, I'm sure. I'm just going to set the stage a little bit. Natural disasters are not new. Natural disasters affecting our trail infrastructure and public infrastructure in general are not new. I certainly think that all of us would agree that they seem to be happening more often. And unfortunately, in so many places, they seem to be happening with increased veracity. And we're seeing communities having to deal with this. Some communities that haven't seen some of the impacts like we've seen over the last decade. And we know all of you that are engaged in trail development, trail management, trail advocacy, understand that long-term resiliency around natural disasters is something that you're actively planning for, or unfortunately you've had to deal with some of those impacts. So we know that this is a topic that is at the top of mind for many of you. And certainly here at Rails to Trails Conservancy, we will continue to bring resources and bring expertise to the table that help all of you in your advanced planning and unfortunately, if you are struck in your recovery. And I know based on this panel, you're going to learn a lot today. And this is like everything else that we do here at Rails to Trails and through the Trail Nation Collaborative. This is an evolving learning process for all of us, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue with everybody. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our panelists and look forward to the conversation. Please, again, Q&A in the Q&A section, and we'll get back to that at the end of the webinar.
Great, thanks, Eric. Well, again, I'm Jackie Casino. I am the Vermont Rail Trails Program Manager with the Agency of Transportation. I'm going to give you an overview of our trail system, discuss our disaster preparedness, response, and recovery process, and we'll touch on our 2023 flood event. Next slide, please. So Vermont Rail Trails are 4-season, multi-purpose recreation and transportation corridors connecting historic towns and villages across all parts of the state. Created in 2022, our rail trail program was the first of its kind to be housed within a state DOT. So you'll often hear me say VTrans, but I'm referring to the Agency of Transportation. So VTrans is responsible for local and regional coordination, maintenance, marketing, communication, and general oversight of around 150 miles of federally rail-banked trails. There's 4 of these total that we oversee in the state. These are 4-season trails with a variety of non-motorized users, an exception for snow machines during the winter season. The majority of these trails are located in rural Vermont, and they connect our vibrant villages and downtowns. Next slide. So before we dive into the disasters, we'd like to take a moment to discuss our blue sky work. and that includes the maintenance and preservation of our rail-banked trails. This includes developing necessary trail-specific standards, guidelines, and plans that support a consistent end-to-end user experience. It also includes asset management, inspection, seasonal maintenance, capital projects, large and small, and trail operations, which really focuses on establishing clear policies and procedures for who can do what, where, and when on our trail systems. A critical component of the rail trail program's mission is to really look beyond the linear corridors and to support economic development and community connections in our towns. The outdoor recreation industry provides $2.1 billion in value added for the state of Vermont, accounting for approximately 5% of our gross domestic product. The Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, or the LVRT, in one county alone, that's Caledonia County, attracts an estimated 70,000 annual visitors and provides an estimated 2.24 million in annual sales activities. So the agency, it is critical for us, of course, to maintain and preserve their corridors, but we would be remiss if we didn't look beyond these corridors, the value the trails provide. So we support our local communities through direct grants, technical support, data collection, such as user counts, surveys, and economic impact assessments. Next slide. That's the summary of the things we're doing when it's not emergency recovery mode. Switching gears a little bit to really take a look at work that's consumed our team and much of the state of Vermont for the last 2 years. That's flood recovery. We've had 5 federally declared disasters that have impacted our rail trails over the last 2 years. And we'll be reviewing damages specific to the 2023 event, how we've engaged with our state and federal partners. But first, let's discuss roles and responsibilities and really the most critical part of disaster response and recovery, and that is what are we doing for the preparedness part of this. So we've worked very closely with AOT, our emergency management staff. We also work with the state of Vermont, the Vermont emergency management staff, and then finally FEMA. So our federal partners are obviously a critical component of the work that we do. We primarily work with the public assistance program and hazard mitigation program. So diving a little bit into the process details before events even occur during our blue sky work, we are ensuring that our codes and standards are up to date. We're ensuring that our asset inventories and inspections are up to date and are well documented. This is important for the repair justification, whether you utilize the public assistance program or hazard mitigation program. So we prepare for damage assessments, the process, and also the equipment that's needed to do that. We look at the staff delegation of duties and determine, are we right size? Can we do the work that needs to be done with the staff we have in-house? We ensure our equipment is in a state of good repair and that we have the necessary training so we can hit the ground running. We also formulate, when events are predicted, we formulate an immediate action plan so that once we're cleared to go in the field, we know who's going where and when. So immediately after the event, once our staff are cleared to be in the field, the initial data collection process begins. And it doesn't matter if you have volunteers that are using a paper form or if you're using a GIS-based assessment like we do, consistency and documentation is key. And noting sites that you need to go back to, if you need a structural engineer or additional photos, any of those items. What you don't want is to have 150 damaged sites and get back to the office and have everybody be doing something differently, right? Cost estimates and having consistent way to document that is very important. So whether you use a set of standards from the National Park Service or your own DOT, you just need to have a set of standards. And then, we are calculating what the overall costs are and submitting that to FEMA and have the determination whether or not it will be a federally declared disaster. Regardless of eligibility, it's important to move forward with repairs as fast as possible or to stabilize the site. Next slide, please. A little bit more about the 2023 flood event in the state of Vermont. It occurred from July 10th through 11th. It unleashed 9 inches of rain throughout the state of Vermont over a 48-hour time period. It impacted all 14 counties in the state, and there was catastrophic flooding and millions of dollars in damages. Pictured here is my hometown, the capital of our state, with the city of Montpelier. You can see the Golden Dome in one of those pictures. You can also see my 3 kids. We are on the State House lawn. We live right up the hill from it. And what's underwater there is State Street. One's right in front of the State House. And we were trapped for 3 days. We could not get in and out of our town. So we are very fortunate, but this is more common occurrence than we would like to have happen. You know, downtown Montpelier is located in the 100-year floodplain, and this is very common in the state of Vermont. So just a quick note for the 2023 event, the timeline for how fast things can happen, because this really lends back to the importance of the preparedness component. And I don't mean the quickness of the event, but how fast things can happen in terms of setting things in motion for who's doing what and when. So on the 9th, our Governor Phil Scott issued a state of emergency based on data from weather and water forecasts for a high likelihood of excessive rain. This activated our state emergency operations center. The 10th through the 11th is when the heaviest rainfall occurred, July 11th. By that time, almost 100 state and U.S. highways were closed across the state of Vermont. By July 14th, over 200 urban and swiftwater rescues had been performed in the state of Vermont. On July 13th, Governor Scott requested a major disaster declaration from President Biden. And by the 14th, the president approved the declaration and mobilized federal resources for the recovery effort. Also to note, for those assets that are eligible for FEMA reimbursement, all temporary work has to be complete within 6 months of that federally declared disaster date. All permanent work has to be complete within 18 months unless you request an extension. So again, the importance of being able to hit the ground running, because these things can happen very quickly and you don't want to be spinning your wheels on a plan after the disaster date has already come. Next slide, please. We will take just a short time to look very closely at one of our trails that was damaged in the 2023 event. This is the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. It runs east to west on the northern part of our state. It is 94 miles long. It is the longest rail trail in the state of Vermont and the longest rail trail in New England. During the 2023 event, we had 138 individually damaged sites. What you see here is a picture of our GIS-based assessment tool that allows us to document the sites in the field and upload all the photos. It's something we give FEMA direct access to. It saves us a lot of time. You have not having to upload things to an external site for them. They can just access this. And so the majority of the damage was concentrated in Lamoille and Caledonia counties, which is the northeastern part of the state. And we'll walk through just a few slides looking at repairs at one site. That was Bridge 38 in Hardwick, Vermont. We call Hardwick our gateway to the Northeast Kingdom. It's really the northeasternmost counties in the state of Vermont, and it is a great place to visit and recreate if you haven't. You know, home of JP Ski Resort, Kingdom Trails, which is a world-class renowned mountain bike trail system, as well as part of the LVRT. And just keep in mind when we think about, again, the timing and FEMA reimbursement and all of those things I mentioned earlier, our event, the declaration happened on July 14th. We brought on a structural engineer that was one of our staff September 14th. And our objective was to have the trail open end to end for snow travel by January 1st of that next year. So that's a 4-month time period for the repairs of these bigger sites to get the trail open. We'll be looking at Bridge 38. So 4-month repair window, and we hit that goal, right? Just for context, a traditional bridge replacement project averages around 5 years. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background about Bridge 38. These are images from directly after the event. It was a historic 2-span riveted steel deck plate girder bridge with a steel bent pier, support on H-piles located over the Lamoille River. During the flood event, as you can see from these pictures, there was debris caught on the center pier that held both bridge spans. It then diverted water around the pier and into the western abutment and trail area. The flood waters flowed under and undermined the abutment number 2, or that western side, which then failed completely. It rolled forward into the river. The bridge span that had been supported by that abutment then fell into the river and twisted, damaging the structural steel in one flange. Due to the erosion and relocation of the west side of the riverbank, the second span of the bridge was no longer able to span the channel completely. It was therefore determined the bridge was a complete failure and that the 200-foot bridge was hydraulically inadequate. So we decided to replace the bridge with a 205-foot single span PED bridge. And I think, this image shows really well, but the river, as many of us who are dealing with these historic assets like a rail trail, the railroad company came in the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s. The river moved very differently. The type of weather events we had then are very different than what we're experiencing now. So the ability to document and be flexible with your design and try to make improvements so things are more resilient is critically important. So we'll just slowly go through the next few slides just so you can see these are images of work that was completed on Bridge 38. So next slide, and then if you don't mind, just pause for a few seconds and then go to the next one. And we can keep moving through till we get to the last slide. So this is just pouring the new bridge abutments. You can keep going. Thank you. And that is what Bridge 38 looks like today. So I just wanted to leave this group with disaster recovery, whether you're dealing with Federal Highway or FEMA or some other group entirely, it can be cumbersome and lengthy. A lot can happen between the event and when the disaster declaration actually occurs. The more your systems are in place, the smoother your recovery effort will be. For complex sites, it's important to engage appropriate staff, whether it's a contractor or your own forces. The longer you wait, the more risk to the asset and the user. Your process and standards, although they can be cumbersome and time consuming to set up, those will be what you use to justify acting quickly, and they're important to have. And finally, document everything before, during, and after the event. It is crucial for reimbursement. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Lisa Raleigh. I'm the executive director of Riverlink, and we are an Asheville-based 35-year-old river conservation organization. Next, please. And we have a pretty unique mission. It's to promote both the environmental and the economic vitality of the French Broad River watershed, and to do so for all. That is about an 8-county watershed. And we have a huge emphasis on inclusion and access and ensuring that everyone feels welcome throughout the watershed. Next, please. So our history has led to a really unique role within the Asheville and greater area. We are a big greenway and river park partner. And it started back in the late 80s and early 90s with kind of co-founding and visioning the Wilma Dykeman Riverway Plan, which was this beautiful imagination of a series of greenway network throughout Asheville proper and into the surrounding areas, at a time when Asheville's relationship with the French Broad River was incredibly industrial. And so this became kind of this North Star of what could be for bringing people to the river and enjoying it in an outdoor recreation capacity. And it still holds true today. They continue all these years later. The city of Asheville still uses the Wilma Dykeman Riverway Plan as its map to future greenway segments and additional connectivity. And in the execution of that plan, you had a whole lot of industrial brownfields go into the brownfield program and be converted into beautiful river parks, anchoring our greenway network throughout the city and county. And so RiverLink itself was instrumental. If you've ever been to the Asheville area, and particularly down in the River Arts District, there are all these gorgeous river parks that accompany the art community and all the wonderful commerce down there. But those include French Broad River Park, Gene Webb Park, Carrier Park. Karen Craig Nolan Park is a RiverLink park named in honor of our founder. And we're building another park up just north of the River Arts District called Gateway. So next. Also, much like Jackie was alluding to, these are economic drivers to our region. And so when they recently did a study to look at what does the river network bring to our economy. And when you look at the river network, that now includes all of our greenways and our supporting parks. And it's over a $3.8 billion a year driver to the region. And like Asheville itself is not very big. We have a population of just under 100,000. But this network that's anchored in Asheville and the river system throughout the area is just extraordinarily beneficial to our economy. But next, but you guys are here today to hear a little bit more about how all that fared during the really kind of historic event of Hurricane Helene, which arrived in Asheville or peaked in Asheville on September 27th, 2024. We just celebrated the 6-month anniversary last year. And I say celebrated, meaning a whole lot of reverence, a whole lot of gathering, a whole lot of, there was an extraordinary loss of life and damage, but also an incredible amount of resilience. And so the 6-month marker has been pretty powerful here. Next. And this impacted our organization hugely. RiverLink is in a historic building down in the River Arts District, which is much like Jackie was describing some of their cities. This district is in the floodplain. We had 4 feet of water churning through our offices, which are on that second story. So our organization pretty much lost all of our office equipment and other equipment. We moved our vehicles inland. They were still totaled because the extent of this was enormous. Next. One question they asked of us as panelists is to say, hey, can you speak to, is this something you knew and expected, and is this a regular occurrence in your region? And that question kind of proves to be more loaded than you would like. So Asheville and the surrounding area is incredibly water rich, right? We are a temperate rainforest in the surrounding area. We get a lot of annual rain. We have nuisance micro medium flooding all the time. But the crazy part was this is RiverLink's offices. And so did we know this was in our DNA? So that arrow on the left, that lower white mark, has been there forever. And that's the Great Flood of 1916's high water mark. So every single day I walked into my office and I walked by that. So my brain registered it, but my heart could go nowhere near imagining water here. And on the right or across our door, you see the new high water mark, and it was 1.5 feet higher. So barely over 100 years. We've had some major flooding in between, nothing of this magnitude. But this is our reality, right? And we all know we're living in a planet that is warming. We've got storms. People were like, well, can a hurricane make it to the mountains of Western North Carolina? But these are wetter storms. They're coming further. And we have a lot of precursor events where we get one rain front compounded by another. So yeah, I think we know this is our future. So in terms of, what fared well, can we go next? So this amazing greenway system that's interwoven through Asheville and through the heart of the River Arts District. This was what you're seeing here as part of what the city of Asheville called RADTIP, which was the River Arts District Transportation Improvement Project. This was like an $80 million project a few years ago to add all this complementary greenway infrastructure, stormwater features, and parks. This is all right adjacent to the French Broad, and became this beautiful amenity to the commerce and the economy of the River Arts District. And much of the greenway system did really well. This was under 25 feet of water, but when the floodwaters emerged, a lot of it was intact. And it was just such a reminder of, if we're going to be developed in our floodplains, this is the right type of accompaniment, right? If urban greenways have all this passive space with it, and all these built-in flood management. I mean, something like Helene, you just got to come out on the other side of, right? But we get this medium flooding all the time. So we feel really good about that. Next. Another thing that performed well were some of our river parks, not all. So this one is Karen Craig Nolan Park, our founder park. And this is it just I don't know, a week or so after the storm. Next, please. So here's a rendering that's very true to life. The park looks just like this. And so our park fared incredibly well. Many river parks in the area are still offline and could be offline, for potentially up to a year or longer, depending on how much infrastructure they had in them. So Karen Craig Nolan Park, or KCP, as we lovingly call her, one thing that's pretty unique is she had a completely intact riparian zone. So you see that huge tree buffer running all along the river. That is a multi-species, multi-storied natural buffer you would find on any river in the Southeast. It will come with a big, wild and woolly, wondrous riparian zone. And because of that, we don't have river view sheds from our park, but because of that, we did not lose 1 inch of bank. And so our destruction was minimal. We also have our greenway inset pretty far. Everything in our park is linear, so when it flooded, we have really extensive signage by Nelson Bird Waltz, but we didn't lose a thing because everything was with the flow. And then we have very little development in the park. And so that has us really thinking a lot about what should a river park be? And almost all of our river parks hold greenways. So next. Unfortunately, not all greenways fared well in the system after Helene. And a lot of it has to do with two things. A, their proximity to the river. If they're too close to the river, they're very prone to bank erosion. And B, if they're too close to the river, it was probably at the expense of the original riparian zone. So next. So throughout Asheville and throughout our region, where the greenways, this is the opposite side of the river in the same area, where the greenways were too close to the river, we did have pretty extensive damage. And next. We've got a $60 billion price tag on the overall damage to to North Carolina in this storm. And a lot of it has to do with not only our recreational amenities being too close, perhaps, but straight up, we're overdeveloped in our floodplains and we're developed too close to the riverbanks. So as a result, like what you see in this picture is occurring throughout our urban areas. And it's just heartbreaking, to try to recover from this. So next. So just like 4 high-level lessons that we take away watching what happened in a highly urban environment, particularly with our greenways and transportation networks. When there is a healthy riparian zone, it is extraordinary how much of our own human infrastructure was protected and how little natural damage has occurred. Unfortunately, because when you live, much like what Jackie has in her terrain, we live in a really mountainous area in Western North Carolina. And some of the only places we can actually be are down on the floodplain floor. And so when the railroad came in 100+ years ago, like we started getting too close to our rivers and removing a lot of trees. And so it's just a legacy that we keep adding to every time we remove any more riparian zones. So we're enormous advocates of please, please, please don't ever let a recreational pursuit like a greenway be at the expense of your riparian zone. If you're going riverside, back it up. It makes right-of-way harder. It makes costs higher. But we don't believe a recreation pursuit should ever cause bank damage. And here's why. Number 2, slide learned. Next. The cost. The cost to restore banks. This is what Riverlink does as part of our jam. It costs almost $200 to $600 a linear foot to stabilize a bank and repair it, restore it, and revegetate it. And that is just outside of the disaster dollars. Unless infrastructure fell in, disaster funding won't cover all this bank damage. So please don't compromise your banks in the first place. And we're working with our greenway partners who are pushing new greenways, riverfront greenways, to say we got to figure out how to make sure it's not at the cost of the riparian zone. Next. A wonderful lesson. I'm doing it for Eric because he and I did a panel together in Asheville and he loves this. So it's extraordinary what some of the native species can do. So this is indigenous native river cane, incredibly important to the Cherokee community, to the artisans. It also has resilience, flood resilience, like you can't believe. So it is under pressure. There's much less than there used to be historically due to development. But where these cane stands are, and these aren't the invasive cousin bamboo, this is the, indigenous river cane. It was extraordinary. Anywhere we found it, it had popped back up as if nothing had happened. And it's got this root system that is so tenacious. There's just rarely bank loss anywhere you see river canes. So we're actually under a couple of grant programs to transplant and keep encouraging. And we're infusing all of our riparian zones on the properties we own with additional river cane. Next. And I think my last lesson on this front is I've been thinking so much about our river parks. So all these river parks host greenways, they host trailheads, but those parks that had a lot of infrastructure did not fare well. Whether they had like playground and recreation, or several of our parks actually had dammed streams that were lakes. But when the hurricane happened, the river just took it back. The river's like the Swananoa River says, I'm not a pair of ponds over here. I am a stream channel, and blew out these places. And so Riverlink is really working with the city and county and speaking out anywhere we can. These river parks are the first line of defense for flooding. And if we can build them in, if they can hold our greenways, please let's not put a bunch of human investment in them. Let them flood, let them recede, because a park like this will take months to years to get back up and running. But with less, they're off and ready to go. Next. And then just maybe a couple silver linings, not that you wanted them, of course, but opportunities always present themselves. So one thing we're seeing a lot of here is because we have so much residential and commercial in our urbanized floodplain environments, a lot of these folks have flooded multiple times, right? This one was catastrophic beyond comprehension, but we have a lot of flood weary folks. And so this go round, we have, hundreds of people entering the FEMA buyout program, because for them, that is a better choice at this juncture in the floodplain. And that program, while fraught with its own challenges, as we can only imagine, today and even, before, what it does is it lets a voluntary flood property owner who qualifies get the full market value of their property the day before the storm. And so Asheville had really, and the surrounding area has really high property values. So it lets people out whole if they just can't keep rebuilding in the floodplain. And then it ultimately, everything gets raised off of the property, and it's ultimately turned back over to the jurisdiction, whether it be a municipality or a county. And then it's deeded in perpetuity to be passive space in the floodplain. And you can do wondrous creative recreational stuff with this. You can get permission to do all kinds of things. You just don't have developed infrastructure. And so we're big advocates of making sure every property owner knows about this. Next. And another silver lining is it really helps with these connectivity greenway corridors if, like, the community of Swananoa sits halfway between Asheville and Black Mountain, where I am right now, and it was just at the epicenter of this storm. The damage there and the loss of life and property and home and habitat is really beyond comprehension. And they already were a community fighting for greenway connectivity. They had some grants, they had some feasibility study. But on the heels of the storm, the opportunities are different because many of those FEMA buyout properties are going to be on the Swananoa corridor. And so they, in their recovery, which is multifaceted, they're really gung-ho on revisiting feasibility and keeping an eye that maybe one of the silver linings from this will be they will be more able to get the connectivity they were hoping for, not only in their own community, but to Black Mountain and Asheville. So in closing, next, please. This photo, I mean, every time I see this photo, I'm just like, I personally and organizationally will be forever drop to my knees, humbled by experiencing this event. I come from Colorado 3.5 years ago. I've never seen anything like this. At the same time, the tenacity of people, the goodness of people, watching communities recover, coming together, collaborating. I mean, we collaborate in more cross-jurisdictional ways. We're collaborating with other conservation organizations on the same team, on the same projects. Like, there's so many silver linings. And I think the last slide, please, is I believe with all my heart, it's a journey. It's not the last journey. We will flood again, but I know I can just sense it. We're coming back smarter, more resilient. I'm confident when we get ourselves back together again, we'll look around and say, wow, these were positive outcomes that came out of this. We see where we built in more resilience. Yes, we're going to have our economies in our floodplains in Western North Carolina. We have to, but I think we'll be able to do it with more understanding. And I end with, everywhere we go, we say in our region, these rivers, the French Broad River and her streams and tributaries they are the economic, recreational and environmental backbones to our region. And it's really upon us to learn how to live in and amongst them. So thank you.
Aloha, this is Saman Dias, and I am honored to be here today to speak in regards to the West Maui Greenway. I represent Maui Bicycling League as the chair, as well as the West Maui Greenway Alliance. West Maui Greenway is more than a recreational path, and it is a lifeline for disaster resilience, mobility, and economic recovery. If you look at this map here on this slide, you see if you are from mainland and have hopefully visited Maui, this is the West Maui, and the Greenway is a 25-mile multi-use trail that the advocates have been advocating for. Using the old cane haul roads and starting from north side of West Maui going towards the south, which covers pretty much by bike or by walking on the trail, you could complete the West Maui through this trail. Next slide, please. My experience and the story and the message today is, as advocates, how we managed to get this project to the finish line, to hopefully to the implementation level, and how long it took and the opportunities that created us to get there. Advocates saw the opportunity to implement West Maui Greenway using the old cane haul roads, and due to traffic congestion and the need for multi-use trails for health, transportation, and also as an emergency evacuation. But the emergency evacuation was not the top priority at that time, or wasn't highlighted as the main benefit. We went to a workshop, MAP 21, Making Progress for the 21st Century, in year 2015, leading to the establishment of Maui Bicycling League, the nonprofit under Hawaii Bicycling League, which was a takeaway from this MAP 21 workshop. At that time, Maui Bicycling League was non-existent. To the next slide, please. From the takeaway from the workshop, we also learned if you wanted federal funding, you got to have a metropolitan planning organization. So we started advocating to establish metropolitan planning organization, and was established on Maui 2016. West Maui Greenway then was incorporated via the MPO to many long-range transportation, many plans and long-range transportation plans. We also established West Maui Greenway Alliance, as well as created a website, held events to bring community together, was funded by the Hawaii Tourist Authority, and also National Park Services pro bono grant to create the initial West Maui Greenway plan. We were funded through MPO to create the West Maui Greenway Master Plan in year 2022, October. Then we had a transition in our new administration, new mayor. So we had a change and a slowdown in the implementation of the project. We held many bike rides, and e-bikes really encourage and help getting public officials to participate in exploration rides. The challenges we faced was the Maui County was slow response due to funding, staffing shortages, and lack of designated implementation agency. Even though MPO was instrumental in creating and funding the master plan, but it wasn't an implementation entity. Department of Public Works, their priorities were traditional infrastructure over multi-use trails. To the next slide, cane haul roads and long-standing advocacy. So it's really interesting that cane haul roads have long been considered to emergency evacuation, but was never implemented. If you search on the net, you would find plans after plans discussing, but not implemented. West Maui Greenway project has been on plans for over 50 years. And the Maui Bicycling League has been advocating for this project for over 10 years. The next slide. Why trails matter in a disaster response. Then the Lahaina fire take place, August of 2023. We lost over 100 lives. I live in this community. I'm only about 3 miles north of where Lahaina burned down. 2,200 structures were destroyed. Over 5.5 billion in damages. Thousands displaced. Major economic loss, job losses due to tourism and business shutdowns. Next slide. West Maui infrastructure challenges. We have only one lane to get to West Maui, and we have one lane out of West Maui. Residents had no evacuation route. Some jumped into the ocean. This picture was taken from how these people were struggling, spending over 14 hours in the water before rescue. So it was really clear that the trails are not just recreation path. Trails provide emergency solutions, specifically for Maui, a place where one way in and one way out. Next slides, please. So to advocates that I like to bring this to your attention, even though it's such an unfortunate situation with all the losses that we faced, but we, West Maui Greenway, we were at the right place at the right time. August 2023 fire reignited the urgency for West Maui Greenway. Supported pointed to evidence that locked gates and blocked cane haul roads prevented evacuation. So these cane haul roads exist. It's not like you have to create it. And these roads were used during the plantation era to haul cane. But some of the part of the road is owned by private, some are owned by county, some are owned by state, and the gates were locked. And there were over 30 people burned in some of these places that they couldn't get through. Some of them knew about the cane haul road and managed to escape by using the cane haul road. The trail at one, can we go back please to the slide? So there is really important thing that happened. We received encouraging words from our Kauai advocates. Never let a disaster go to waste. They used the Denver post-disaster funding to build its amazing Cherry Creek Trail system, so Maui can do the same. Next slide, please. We started with that encouraging words. We started writing letters to public officials. Over 100 letters were written. We reached out to media outlets. Honolulu Civil Beat wrote an article. Could West Maui's old cane haul road have helped more people to escape from fire? FEMA picked up our Greenway plan because we were the only plan that with a master plan and was ready for implementation. Community engagement and surveys secured high level of support. Next slide, please. So major breakthrough, federal funding and next steps. FEMA and National Park Services backed West Maui Greenway as a key recovery project. Maui County incorporated the West Maui Greenway into the Lahaina's long-term recovery plan. Maui County applied for the RACE grant, now it's called the Build America, and secured $15.4 million to complete the phase 1 of West Maui Greenway, which would be 5.5 miles. Next slide, please. Lessons learned and call to action. Key takeaways from this presentation that I leave with you is that disasters expose vulnerabilities, but also create opportunities for resilience. Trails must be recognized as an essential infrastructure and not just recreation. Being in the right place at the right time, have a plan, be prepared and ready. And we did not envision that it would take us 10 years to go through the steps that we learned from MAP 21, but we worked on it. We worked on it and we were ready. And we didn't expect a disaster to happen to make this project a priority for our government, but bad situation creates new opportunities. Next slide, please. Here are some facts. Since 1980, there has been over 400 weather and climate disasters, where overall damage costs exceeded $1 billion, according to the National Centers for Environmental Information. The total cost of these 400 events exceeded $2.785 trillion. We need to rebrand trails are more than a recreation path. We need to advocate local level, state level, federal level. We need to address the economic impact for our communities. Encourage private, public partners to come partner and fund trail projects like West Maui Greenway. Support national organizations like Rails to Trails to get the message out to policymakers. Next slide, please. I thank you for your time. I hope you walk away with some ideas if you are an advocate, and also if you are a government entity, understand how these trails, multi-use trails, can be positioned as more of a disaster recovery project. Thank you. And the website is there, and please feel free to reach out with any questions. My email address is there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Saman. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Lisa. Amazing work on it's a hard subject, obviously, but we thank you for sharing your stories. One more call out for questions. If you have some questions, throw them in the Q&A box. We have a few here that I'm going to get into in just one moment. Before we jump to Q&A, though, I wanted to also share this exciting news. Rails to Trails Conservancy is going to be hosting a Trail Nation Summit. This is coming in Cleveland this coming October 27th to 29th. I really hope you can join us. We're going to be diving into a ton of innovative strategies for creating and expanding trail and active transportation networks through mobile workshops, immersive learning opportunities, all kinds of wonderful conversation. Early bird registration is open now, and the link is in the chat. If you are interested in working on care about connecting trail networks, this is a gathering for you. That it is going to be the sole focus of the Trail Nation Summit. So lots of conferences, they're all wonderful, but if this topic is really interesting to you, you won't find a place where you'll have deeper conversation about that very topic. So with that, I'm going to jump into some questions. And Jackie, you brought up some of what you did here, but I'm going to ask this question of everybody. And please, Jackie, unmute and feel free to expand on a little bit of what you said in your presentation. But someone was asking about tools. Like, what kind of tools did you use to assess the damage along your trails? And then how have some of those tools helped support recovery? And open question to any of you, but assessment tools and how are those tools helping support recovery?
I'm happy to jump in. Sorry, I had to sign out and sign back in. I don't know what was going. Who knows what was going on? Technology, right? So we are very fortunate in that we're embedded. My organization is embedded within the state DOT, and so I feel like we do have an abundance of resources at our disposal. So we utilize a GIS-based mobile app for damage assessments. We do periodically tweak it and tune it up. There are wonky things. It was designed for the highway network. There are wonky things. It's not one size fits all, such as our historic stone culverts, right? So when FEMA comes on the scene and they want cost estimates for putting it back exactly how it was, how do you assign a value to that, right? These were built by stonemasons in the 1800s, but we do the best we can, right? So we essentially utilize this tool, and it feeds into a larger database. We are working towards having our cost estimation process, which is tied into the agency's cost specification book, which quantifies costs for everything from like pavement to ballast and riprap, things when you are trying to repair an embankment, right? That will be automated soon. Right now, we are calculating all that by hand. So it's fine when you have 10 sites and it's me back in the office after being in the field for 5 days doing the damage assessments myself with my team. It's not fine when we have 150 sites, right? So there's certainly some efficiencies and some tweaks that we need to continue to have happen. But right now it works well. It feeds into the overall state system. So the state of Vermont can very quickly see how much damages to the public sector there are.
Mm. And in our region, if the greenways happened in a municipality or a township, I'm so sorry, if the greenway damage happened, it is cataloged and inventoried in their FEMA through Parks and Rec. But it's hard, right? Because there's a lot of priorities when municipalities and entities are having to prioritize the damage. I mean, we have $60 billion worth of damage being cataloged. And sometimes I think the Parks and Rec are not going to take the same priority and are going to be later in the process. So I know, I want to say it was just in the last month, which would be month 5, that some of the FEMA inspections were taking place on some of the greenways and parks. Just to give you perspective, even though they were here from day one, it was taking 5 months to even get to that inventory, and we're not even in that heavily of a populated area. So it's a long process to even figure out the federal monies. And then in our case, because I want to just go off on this for a second, if you don't have physical greenway damage, because that will be picked up as inventory by the municipality, but all that bank damage in between that is still on the right of way of like Parks and Rec, but didn't have the falling in infrastructure, like that's not going to get covered under federal disaster monies. And it, like saying how expensive that is, so reinforcing that system and working with our partners at the city of Asheville and other places to offer to chase down funding, third party funding to do restoration outside of the inventory damage to the banks.
Yep. Maybe let me pivot. I know we're running short on time and there's so many good questions, but someone was asking, the recovery process is long, tedious, and deeply matrixed with a variety of agencies, right? What experience do you have system-wise building relevant teams, and how do you have some examples that you can share with people to streamline that process, right? How are you integrating some of the issues that you're having with your trails in recovery and uh, in that whole thing that you just said, Lisa, right? It's a long, complicated, so many players at the table. How have you been navigating that for your trails? And again, that's open to anybody here.
And I'll do a really quick comment on, it depends. The complications get greater when there's more jurisdictions involved. And so um if it is part of the city's inventory thing, they're like, we got to get it inventoried and we got to get it through FEMA before third parties like nonprofits can help, right? Like we're in close partnership with these guys all the time. They hold easements on our greenways. We help, work on their greenways. But if you find yourself in unincorporated areas like Swannanoa, it doesn't have a municipality and it's just one of Buncombe County's many damaged places, the collaboration there's been different. Nonprofits are coming together across all sectors, across the greenways, across the parks, across the reimagining and the rebuilding. So we've had so many experts come into town and speak to us, and no two disaster recoveries are alike, not even in your own region, because it's very unique to who are all the partners, like jurisdictionally first, because they are at the federal interface of these monies, right? And so um, everyone says, is there a playbook? Can you write a playbook? I don't even think you can, even in your own region across 5 different towns, right? Each town has a different way of approaching it.
I'm happy to just add that, it might perhaps is a little easier for us as a state entity on a state-owned asset. And so we have staff that's what their job is, right? Part of our emergency management group, they work very closely with other state partners. And then they inform me like, okay, FEMA's in town, here's what we do, here's the process, right? I think, for smaller jurisdictions, municipal government, unincorporated areas, I cannot even fathom, disaster response, recovery, repairs, and navigating the processes. So just being very fortunate to have that staff to really navigate me through that process has been critical.
And let me I can't ask this whole question because there's just not going to be time to get into it. But Saman, I think this is really more, it's one of the key takeaways from the West Maui and the Lahaina story here is you talked about how this disaster has helped crystallize many people's understanding of the value of the West Maui Greenway beyond a recreational trail, but as a vital resource in resiliency for something like this, and the fact that people were trying to access the cane roads and couldn't in some places, which is just the most tragic way to understand how valuable it could have been if it was open, right? Um, have you been able to, besides just the terrible story that you shared of people trying to use them, do you have any tips on how people can tell the story of their trail resources as, critical infrastructure in both planning ahead of time, right? Like if it was there, it could have been such a bigger, better resource for people to get out, and then long-term recovery and resiliency too how the story you're able to tell is there because of this tragedy. How would you give people some tips on how, there's a value there that is beyond monetary? You saw a loss of life, right? How can people tell that story for their community that, hey, trails that are thought about in this way bring a value almost beyond ROI, right?
Yes, yes. I think if we had um, understood or we had planned, I think we would have changed the priorities of the Greenway from being a recreation as number one, or transportation connectivity as number one, to emergency evacuation. And that's what happened after the fire. We changed our narrative, addressing it more from an emergency evacuation, especially in our community. We even Palisades, I was watching TV and I was like, wow, they're facing this. All those cars were blocked. All the electric poles fell and broke into 3 pieces. And people just couldn't use the road. It was too dangerous. So there was no way. And every turn that they took was closed. Every turn they took was closed. So, and if you see behind me the picture, that mountain range, and the Greenway runs right on the bottom of that mountain range, and it runs parallel to the highway. So it was not a rocket science. It's not, and so um, disasters with the change in the climate, it is happening in all our communities, and we need to be prepared for that. And the wonderful thing is, use the trail like what happened in Denver, that Kauai advocates encouraged us to use this as an emergency evacuation when you need for emergency, and then other times it's a trail, it's a connectivity, you're connecting, and it's a transportation option. So So I think that was really, I think everyone should think of incorporating the emergency and how the trails, and Lisa and Jackie talked about it, how they are being built, and it may cost you more. And one of the areas that we were challenged when every time we talked about emergency evacuation route before the fire, oh, it's going to cost so much more because you got to now have fire hydrants driving and the fire trucks driving, and then we are like, oh, okay, let's not go there. But no, we need to go there. We need to go there even though it's cost more. Let's plan for that. And there are also other avenues for funding when it is positioned more from a emergency evacuation.
Thank you all so much. That was great. I think we could have spent another hour easily. And thank you all who attended today. And like I said at the outset, this is a topic that Rails to Trails Conservancy will continue to find voices and resources and build the resource library for all of you. Unfortunately, this is a topic that we all need to be spending a lot more time and energy thinking about and planning for, so that when something like this happens, your community is set up to withstand it and be as resilient as possible. But Jackie, Lisa, Saman, thank you all so much. This has been great, and we will see you on the next Rails to Trails webinar. Thank you, everybody.